Welcome to the Venari Podcast and the next episode in our Biopharma Chief Commercial Officer series. I'm Joe Knight. I lead the commercial function within the life sciences and healthcare practice at Venari Partners. I'm joined today by Pattie Drake, who is Chief Commercial Officer at Trevena. This is Pattie's second CCO role after making the move to small biotech from Merck MSD, where her final role was as CEO of MSD Finland. In the podcast today, we're talking about preparing for your first CCO role, commercialization strategy, and building teams. Hi, Pattie. Welcome to the Venari Podcast.
Thanks a lot, Joe. I appreciate the invitation.
It's great to have you here. Maybe we can start with you. Tell us a little bit about your career to date.
Well, I always tell people that I grew up at Merck because it was my very first job outside of university as soon as I graduated. And then I had a full career there until retirement. So I'd say the first half of my career was really traditional, right? It was sales, it was marketing, it was operations, it was strategy, all across the United States. It was really in the last 10 years that I think it got exciting, starting with my move to Mexico City when I took over responsibility for what we call the diversified brands. A lot of other companies call it mature markets or mature brands. Division, that type of thing. And so I had responsibility for all of South America for that portfolio of products. And then from there, I moved over to Montreal, Canada, where I was the business unit leader for the hospital and specialty business unit. Really loved that for 3 years. And then finally landed in Helsinki, Finland, as you already mentioned, as the CEO and managing director of Finland. And that was my last assignment before retiring. And then I immediately went to my first CCO role at a very small biotech preparing to launch a cancer product. So I built the entire commercial organization fast as I could, as well as building the access strategy, the marketing strategy, et cetera. But unfortunately, that product got a CRL. And so I had to dismantle it even faster. Including myself, in order to preserve the cash runway for the company so that they could do the additional studies that were going to be required to bring it to market. And then since then I've been at Trevena for the last 2 years, really enjoying it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Great story and really interesting career journey. I think if you haven't been through a CRL in your kind of role, you probably haven't done the job long enough. So you were telling us there about the amount of time you spent at Merck, and obviously that was a significant proportion of your career. How do you think that experience in the big pharma side of the industry impacts your strategy as a chief commercial officer in a smaller biotech?
Well, I think that in a small biotech, you obviously have a much smaller margin of error, and that is a very big adjustment. So you have to have, frankly, even more confidence in your strategic choices that you make and the strategy that you build. I think that confidence comes from having really strong foundational skills, but also having broad experiences across an organization, as broad as you possibly can. And that really does build the confidence. I mean, a lot of people say that you've got to learn how to trust your gut. But, the way I kind of think about it is it's really pattern recognition, I think, over a span of a career at the end of the day. It's sort of like, I've seen this before, whether that's good or bad. And so I can better predict what's going to happen at the end of the day. So I really think that's been the largest adjustment, if you will, between the big pharma and the small biotech, not to mention the speed at which we move. And that also has to make you even more confident in the choices that you make.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about your career and kind of put yourself back in that position where you were thinking about where you go next, what would you advise younger Pattie to do? What advice do you have for aspiring execs who are thinking about a chief commercial officer role?
To be candid, and also with the people that I mentor and advice I've given for years and years, it's a bit counterintuitive. I encourage people to work on small products, small brands. And the reason for that is because you're going to have a broad array of responsibilities. When you are an individual, a marketer, a commercial person working on a big brand, your role is extraordinarily narrow. right? So you're going to be the expert on one subject and one subject only. When you work on small, you've got this broad sense of responsibility, and you really do see the fruits of your labor, as opposed to just being a cog in the big wheel, in the big machine. And frankly, then when you are interviewing, you want a career change, you want a promotion, you're better able to point at exactly what you did and what the results were as the fruits of your labor. I mean, this is specifically why I wanted Finland as a country. It was the smallest P&L I had ever had in my whole career, if you can believe that. So I could figure out how to be much more resourceful, much more efficient. But my responsibilities were broader than they'd ever been. I had medical for the first time, manufacturing for the first time, supply chain. I even had animal health responsibilities while I was there. So it really did teach me the end-to-end business. The other thing, and I've mentioned it before, is I could really sort of test my tolerance for risk, right? Because you have to be a risk taker when you're working on small. And also, you've got to do a lot more yourself. Quite frankly, I did rely a lot on those fundamental skills that I learned early in my career, because if you're not doing it yourself, you're going to have to outsource, and outsourcing can be expensive. So you've got to not say, "Where's my chief of staff?" or call a department, because the department doesn't exist. So a lot of times you're rolling up your sleeves, and that's always fun.
So really getting that breadth early on in your career, or as early as is possible, and having full responsibility across a business unit, and possibly even as a GM, is going to be really helpful for that CCO.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at the beginning, when you were introducing yourself, you mentioned building the team as Chief Commercial Officer. I'd like to dig into that a little bit. Tell me, how do you go about planning, hiring, and eventually motivating your team within that commercial sphere?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first rule of thumb is never, never, never compromise on talent. Speed is always an issue, time is always an issue, and that's the pressure point. But if you compromise on talent, you'll regret it forever. And so there's a book that I really love. I read it early in my career, First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. And he talks about how you have to hire for talent and not experience. And that's a whole different interviewing skill. That's a whole different skill set to find talent, to draw that talent and potential, to identify potential in a person. So again, fortunately, having a long time in this industry, you also have a lot of contacts. So, I really leverage my network. There's a lot of people in my Rolodex that I'd like to hire. We've worked together before. I want to work with you again. That's happened many times, on both sides of the spectrum. I've had the same boss hire me 3 different roles. I've done the same with other people as well. But if they're even not eligible to be hired, then they also have a network of people, and we really trust that. And of course, when you have to have really specific skill sets, and whether it's a certain geography, a certain therapeutic category, a certain capability, you leverage the services of companies like yours to help you find that. So you go and get that help and support. In terms of motivating people, again, I have a little saying. It's a bit counterintuitive, but I say that it's not my job to motivate you, but it is my job to make sure that motivated people are successful. So it's one of those things you hire for, is you hire motivated people. And now it's your job to make sure they are successful. And you do that through empowering them, trying to remove the bureaucracy that's in every company. Make sure that there's an external focus. That's very motivating, removing barriers, and last but not least, of course, as a leader, you've got to give your team all the credit when things are going well, and that you need to take all of the accountability and the responsibility when things are not going well.
So finally, Pattie, I'd like to ask you to think about 2023 so far and the commercial trends you've seen in this year, but what you also might think is going to come up over the coming years. Is there anything you can pinpoint as a commercial trend that you're keeping an eye on, or think is going to become particularly important in the next couple of years?
Well, certainly my own thinking has evolved over time. And also I learned a lot by being outside of the United States and learning things that we could potentially apply here. And I think there's really 3 shifts or trends. in the way all commercial leaders are beginning to think. You know, in the United States, when we launched the product, it was always go big or go home, period. And we put the pressure on. You've got 6 months to make this thing fly, or else you have failed, right? Type of a mindset. But I do think that mindset is starting to shift a bit, and we're taking a page out of our clinical colleagues' playbook in terms of perhaps a more phased approach is the better way to go, so that you can try, experiment, learn, observe, adjust, and then scale, right? And also, I think that's critical in smaller companies because of the cash runway. You've got to be so mindful about that outflow of cash, and so it's another by phasing it. It's another way to elongate your cash runway and make sure that when you scale, this is going to be the right strategy that works. So I think that's one major trend. A couple of the others are, the payer landscape. We used to prepare for, payers 6 months before launch. Then it's become 12 months before launch. Now it's like 2 years before you're not doing your, payer and reimbursement and price sensitivity work in that area, because the decision makers have shifted. It's not good enough just to have your KOLs and your, healthcare providers now, because administrators are making more and more and more decisions, wielding more and more control. Same formulary decision makers. To that end, so you could say this is trend number 3, or it's in support of trend number 2, and that's having your health economic data ready to go. It isn't good enough anymore to just demonstrate the benefit to the patient. You have to demonstrate the benefit to the healthcare system. And many times that's the economic benefit or the cost deferral to the healthcare system as a result of your product, your innovation that's coming to market.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you. And I wanted to ask you about how you prioritize the different functions of the commercial launch. And I think you answered it there. Really great to have you on the Venari podcast. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I appreciate the invitation very much, Joe.
Thanks. Awesome.